So in the last video, we left off with having put together two different constructors inside of a rectangle class. So we've got one for the no-args constructor right here, and then one for the parameterized constructor right here. And then one of the things that I wanted to address, so we're going to take a look at this in more detail as we go through this video, is why it is that we can actually have two different versions of this constructor, or in a more general sense, why is it that we can have two methods that have the exact same name? So not only is this going to be true for the constructor, but it's also true for many of these other methods that we've worked with. Every one of these methods, there is actually a way to create multiple versions of it where each one of them has the same name. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at that now. So this concept that I'm referring to is what is known as method overloading. So we're going to be looking at how to overload various methods, including the constructor, which we've actually already done. So method overloading allows you to write multiple methods with the same name in a single class. And the way that we can go about doing this, so methods, including the constructor method, they have the same name as long as their method signatures are different. And a method signature is going to consist of the name and then the data types of the parameters for the method. So to briefly take another look at this, so right here, inside of our rectangle class, we have one version of the constructor, so we've got the name, which just matches the name of the class, and then for its parameters, their data types, in this case would be nothing, since we don't take any parameters for this one. And then for this other one, it's going to have that same name, rectangle, but then the parameters are going to be two doubles. So if we want to look at just the data types of the parameters, we would say it's double, double. So in this case, the method signatures between these two constructors are going to be different, specifically because the parameters are different. So one of the things we're going to be looking for whenever we're actually using these methods, including this constructor method, we need to check to see the name of the method that we're trying to call, and we also want to check the data types of the parameters so we know which specific version of that method we're going to be calling. So through method overloading, you can write the same method but allow it to accept many different types of arguments. I have same in quotations here because technically they're not exactly the same method, they just have the same name. So whenever you're calling it, it kind of looks like it's the same method. You've already seen how this can be useful with the rectangles constructor. In addition, we could consider some other methods. So maybe if we had some kind of add method that we use later on, there's two different variations we could think about this. One of those is the add method with two integers. So that's kind of the equivalent of just the math operator, where we just add two numbers together to get their sum. Alternatively, we could have one where it's add with two strings. You can kind of think of that like using the plus operator with string concatenation, where instead of trying to get some kind of sum of two strings, what you're really doing is combining them together to form a larger string. So that kind of shows the distinction, or how we can kind of use certain methods where the name is the same, but the actual data types will be different, so we also change the behavior slightly. And then of course we saw this with the rectangle constructor, so we have the no-args and the parameterized constructor. So in a second we're going to take a look at another class that we can put together. So on the next slide we're going to be looking at the UML class diagram for the bank account class. For this particular one, I'm going to go ahead and go through all of this information about what we're going to be seeing in a moment. Talking a little bit about the fields and methods and what they're going to need to do. So the class is going to have a single field, which is going to be the balance of type double. So if you have a bank account, one of the primary things you're going to need in it is whatever the balance is for that account. The class is going to have several methods, most of which are going to be overloaded. We're going to have a no-args constructor that will set the balance to 0. We then have two additional constructors we're going to be including that will accept a value used to set the balance. You'll notice one of these constructors specifies this value as a string. So for that particular one, that value will first need to be converted to a double before we can put it into the balance or assign it to balance. In order to do this conversion, you'll need to recall the parse double method that we can use on the double class. So see a little bit about the syntax for that when we get to that. The same format is going to be provided for the deposit, withdraw, and set balance methods. So the deposit method should add an amount passed in to the balance. The withdraw method should subtract an amount from the balance. And then the set balance method should just change the balance to whatever the passed in amount is. And then finally, we're going to have the get balance method. So this will be the only one that's not overloaded. We'll just have a single get balance method, which is just going to be used to access the balance of a bank account object. So now taking all of this information and turning that into a UML class diagram, we're going to have something like the following. So we see in our very first section at the top, we've got our name, bank account. In the next section, we've got our one field, which is balance. We're specifying that it should be private, and we're going to say that the data type for it should be double. We then have all of our different methods. So you're going to notice if you look through this that we have the same method names repeated a couple of times. So those are going to be all of our overloaded methods. So we've got 3 different versions of the constructor, so bank account. One of these is going to be the no args constructor. The other 2 are going to be the 2 different parameterized constructors. After that, we have 2 different versions of deposit, one that takes a double and then one that takes a string. 2 different versions of withdraw, one that takes a double and one that takes a string. And then finally, 2 different versions of set balance, again, one that takes a double and one that takes a string. And at the very end right there, we have that get balance, which will return a double. It doesn't take anything. So let's go ahead and actually put this together now. So we're going to come back over to NetBeans and start putting together this whole project that we have right here. So we're going to go ahead and create a new project, make a new Java application. We'll go ahead and click Next. So for this one, we'll go ahead and call this our bank account demo. Click Finish. So in a moment, we'll come back to this one to add in the main method. I'll go ahead and remove a couple of things real quick before we switch over to our bank account class. So just kind of remove some of the extra comments and adjust the style a little bit. And again, just like I did with the rectangle demo, I'll go ahead and leave that to do stub so we can come back to that later. We'll go ahead and close the rectangle. And so over here, we'll go ahead and make a new Java class. I'm going to go ahead and right click on my package, go to New, and go to Java class. And right here, we're going to go ahead and specify the name to be bank account. So this is going to be the bank account file, or the bank account class, with all of those different fields and methods that we just saw. So we can click Finish. Again, we'll go ahead and remove the extra comments. And so right here, we'll go ahead and first start off by adding in that one field. So we need that balance. So we need to specify that that's private. We want to make sure that that is not accessible outside of the bank account class. Go ahead and specify the data type as double. And then finally, we'll go ahead and give it a name. So in this case, we're calling it the balance. And we'll go ahead and initialize it to 0. The next thing we need to put together are going to be the different versions of the constructor. So the first one was going to be the no args constructor. So for that one, we're going to say public bank account. We'll go ahead and do the public keyword. We don't have a return type because a constructor never returns anything. We then have the name of the class. That's also going to be the name of the constructor. So we're going to say bank account. This first one's going to be the no args constructor. So nothing. No parameters inside of the parentheses. And then right here, we'll go ahead and just give it some initial value to assign to balance. So we're just going to say balance is equal to 0. For the next one, we'll go ahead and put together the first parameterized constructor. So we're going to do the one where it can take a double. So we're going to say public bank account. Right here, we're going to go ahead and do the double. For this one, I think it was called start balance. And then what we want to go ahead and do is use this value, the start balance. We'll go ahead and assign that to our balance field. So we're going to say balance is equal to the start balance. And then for the next one, we're going to go ahead and use a string. So we're going to do public bank account. For this one, it's going to be a string, and the name we chose for this one was str. So we're going to do that for all of them. So we'll go ahead and use that string name str right here. And then what we want to go ahead and do is take the value that we're getting from this string. So that should have some kind of number inside of it, but currently it's being treated as a string literal. So we want to parse out the number that's inside of that string and be able to assign that to balance. So we're going to say balance is equal to double So we're going to use the double class, and then we're going to use the parse double method from that class. And we're going to give it the string that we're trying to parse that double out of. So this will be a useful way to go ahead and convert that string into a double and assign that to the balance field. For the next couple of methods, what we're going to need is going to be the deposit and withdraw. So for each one of those, we're going to be adding some amount or subtracting some amount from balance. So for this first one, we're going to do public. In this case, now we can say void. So these will need a return type now. In this case, the return type is going to be void since they're not actually going to return anything. The first one is going to be deposit, and right here we're going to go ahead and do a double, and the name should be amount. And since the amount is already a double, we just need to go ahead and add that to our balance. So essentially what that means is we want to take whatever balance currently has, we'll add amount to that, and then we're going to store all of that back into balance. So one of the ways we could do this would be if we just said balance is equal to balance plus amount. So we can just go ahead and take the balance, add the amount to it, store it back into balance. Alternatively, we can just do this with a combined assignment operator to kind of shorten that line of code. So let's go ahead and do it that way. So I'm going to go ahead and remove all of this and just say balance plus equals amount. So we can go ahead and do the exact same thing with just a shorter line of code. For the next one, we're going to go ahead and do the other deposit. This one's going to take a string. So we're going to say public void deposit, and we're going to do string str. And so for this one, this is kind of a combination of what we just did for deposit as well as what we need to do based on the third bank account constructor. So this whole part right here where we're parsing that double. So we're kind of combining the functionality of these two things. So we're going to say that the balance plus equals that double dot parse double. Go ahead and grab that method with this str, the string right here. So this is going to go ahead and parse out the double that is inside of that string, and then go ahead and add that to balance and store the whole thing back into balance. For the next part, we're going to go ahead and do the two versions of withdrawal. So this is essentially the same as deposit. The difference now is that we're doing subtraction instead of addition. So we're going to do public void withdraw. We're going to do double amount. So go ahead and just reuse that same variable name. And right here we're going to do balance minus equals the amount. So we're going to go ahead and subtract the amount that we're passing in from balance and then store that difference that we get back into balance. Right here we'll go ahead and do it with a string. So we'll say public void withdraw, and it's going to be string str. And so this is going to be the same as what we did for deposit with a string. Again, the difference is that we're subtracting. So we're going to say balance minus equals double dot parse double. Again, we can go ahead and grab that method right there. We're going to specify that it's the string that we're subtracting from our balance. And then the next two are going to be the two different versions of the set balance method. So for this one, we're going to do public void set balance. For the balance, the name that we're going to be using is going to be bal. So we're going to say that we have a double called bal right here. And so for this one, we're just going to say that balance is equal to bal. So this is basically identical to what we had to do for the constructor. Again, keep in mind that the distinction between the constructor and the set method is that the constructor is done at the moment that you construct the object, while the set method is whenever you want to change that value later on after the object is already constructed. So they'll have the same functionality, but the usage is a little bit different depending on when you need to do this. And then for this next one, we're going to do public void set balance. So we're going to do string str. And for this one, this is going to be just like the third constructor, the one that takes a string. So we're going to say balance is going to be equal to double dot parse double with the str, the string right there. Go ahead and save that. And then finally, for the last method, we're going to be using the getter. So we're going to do public double get balance. So we're going to be using this to return the value that's in the balance field. This one does not take any arguments, so no parameters there. And then right here, we're just going to go ahead and say return balance. So this is going to be returning the balance field that we have in the object right here. So once we have all this put together, we can go ahead and test a little bit of this to see at least a couple of these methods in action. So we'll come over here, we'll go ahead and remove this. So we're going to go ahead and make a bank account object. So we're going to say the name of the class, bank account. We'll go ahead and give it a name. Let's call it something like my account. So be equal to a new bank account object. And then right here, I could just go ahead and rely on the args constructor. We'll just start it off with this initial balance of 0. I could also go ahead and pass in an amount. So maybe we want to go ahead and start off with some amount of money initially. Maybe something like, I don't know, let's say $1,000 to start off with. From there, we could go ahead and do things like depositing an amount or withdrawing an amount from this account that we just made. So we can do something like my account dot deposit. So maybe we want to go ahead and deposit just a couple more, just a little bit more money. So we'll deposit another $300 into this. And then later we want to go ahead and withdraw some money. So we could say something like my account dot withdraw. And maybe from here we're going to go ahead and withdraw a little bit more money that we deposited. So we'll take $500 out of it. So then, of course, if we're keeping track of this, we're going to start with 1,000. We'll add 300 to it, go up to 1,300. We'll go ahead and subtract, or just take $500 out of it, end up with 800. So then if we wanted to go ahead and see that, we could say maybe with a print statement, just go ahead and say your current balance is plus the account that we have. So we have to use my account dot get balance. And save that. And so then if we go ahead and run this, we'll go ahead and perform each one of these different operations, and we'll see this print statement with our current balance at the very end. Let's also go ahead and include one more thing, which is going to be a $sign. We'll go ahead and run this. So right now we'll see your current balance is $800. There's a little bit of additional formatting we need to go ahead and do with this. So in order to fix this up a little bit more, go ahead and include that formatting as well. I want to go ahead and modify this even further, where we could actually let the user type in their own values for this, so that then they can actually go ahead and just use it in real time and just specify some initial balance, some deposits and withdrawals, and then see whatever their balance is at the very end of it. So I'm not going to worry too much about hard coding values like 1,000, 300, or 500. I'm going to let the user decide instead. And in order to do this, I want to go ahead and double check something about the overloaded methods that I've written. So let's use the constructor as an example. So there's 3 different versions of the constructor. One is the no-args constructor. So this makes sense if we don't have an initial balance that we want to specify. We just start it off at 0. And then we have this version that takes a double. So if we do know what the starting balance should be, we can just pass that into the constructor, kind of like what I did right here with this 1,000. But what about this third one, where we do it as a string? When exactly would that be useful? Well, one of the really convenient things about this is that certain methods will interpret the user's input as a string instead of just as a double or an int or some numeric value. And so because of that, it actually makes a lot of sense that we would go ahead and create one version that could take an exact number or a numeric literal, and one version that could take a string literal. By doing both of these constructors like this, it helps to make the bank account class a bit more general purpose or a bit more universal in its applications. So one of the things we could do is maybe go ahead and use the JOptionPane class. So go ahead and do an import right here. So we're going to go ahead and grab the JOptionPane class from the Javix library. It's going to be in the swing package. So you got that import javix.swing.joptionpane. And with this import, I'm going to go ahead and put in some input dialog boxes in my program. So to start off with, right here at the very beginning, I'm going to go ahead and just construct my bank account object, but I'm not going to do anything with it right here. And then in addition to this, I'm going to go ahead and make a string that's going to be holding the inputs as I go through each different step of this program. So you're going to see something like string input, is going to be initially be an empty string, and I'm going to be using this to hold whatever the user provides through each one of the input dialog boxes that I'm going to provide in this program. So the first one that I'm going to go ahead and do right here, we're going to say input is equal to j option pane dot show input dialog. So we want this very first one right here. And for this input dialog, the only thing I need to put in is going to be a string with the question that I want to pose to the user. So I'm going to say, what is your initial balance? So then the user is going to see this input dialog box. There's going to be a little input field where they'll type in their initial balance. We'll go ahead and get that and store that into this input variable right here. From there, what I want to go ahead and do is just pass that immediately into the set balance method for this account. So I'm going to say myAccount.setBalance, and then we're going to put in the input. And the reason that I'll be able to do it directly like this is because through method overloading, since the data type of input is a string, when we come over to the setBalance method, so right down here at the bottom, we're going to go ahead and use this version of it, which is going to go ahead and take that string, parse it to a double, and store that into balance. So it's going to go ahead and do that extra little bit of the work for us. So then once I've done that, I can go ahead and create two more of these input dialog boxes, one for the amount to deposit and one for the amount to withdraw. And in both of those cases, I'm going to go ahead and do the same sort of thing that I did right here. Only now, instead of doing 300 and 500, it's going to be based on whatever the user's input happens to be. So let's say right here, we'll go ahead and grab this line that I have. So go ahead and copy that, paste it right here. And right here, we'll go ahead and put in, instead of what is your initial balance, we'll go ahead and say, how much are you depositing? And just underneath it, we're going to do myAccount.deposit, and instead of doing 300, we'll go ahead and specify the input. So this one is going to be based on this version of deposit right here, where it takes a string, it's going to go ahead and parse it to a double, add that to balance. And then for this last one, we'll go ahead and again just paste in that initial question. We'll go ahead and change this to say, how much are you withdrawing? And then just underneath it, we have myAccount.withdraw, and now instead we're going to put in the input. So we're going to go ahead and use this value right here. And this one's going to go ahead and call the third version of withdrawal. So again, if we take a look in our bank account class, we see right here, taking a string, go ahead and parse it to a double, and then subtract that from balance. And then finally, once we've got all that, we can go ahead and put that into our message dialog box. So I'm going to go ahead and we'll keep this print statement for a moment so I can use that string as kind of a reference. What we're going to go ahead and do right here, though, is put j option pane dot show message dialog. For this one, we'll have two arguments we need to put in. The first is going to be null for the component portion of it, so we're not going to worry too much about that. Just set it to null. The second part that we're really interested in is going to be the message that we print, so similar to these questions. So for this one, we're going to be using this message, or this statement that we had in our print. So I want to go ahead and grab this right here. Go ahead and cut that out. And go ahead and get rid of the rest. And right here, what I'm going to go ahead and do, since I did mention I wanted to do a little bit of formatting to this, ideally because it's a currency, it should be to 2 decimal places. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is put the format method from the string class into here. So I'm going to do string.format. And inside of that method, I'm going to go ahead and put in my string that I'm working with. And so what I need to go ahead and do, two quick little fixes. The first is that right here, I want to go ahead and put in my format specifier that's going to be for the balance that I have. So I'm going to use my %. We're going to do it to 2 decimal places, so I'll do 0.2 for the precision, and then specify that this is F for a floating point number. And then the other thing I'm going to do, I can go ahead and get rid of this plus right here and replace it with a comma so that we can go ahead and indicate our formatted string and then one of the variables I'm going to be using that I want to place into that formatted string. Okay, and then one more little adjustment just to keep this kind of on one line, or at least keep everything visible on the screen. I'll go ahead and move some of it to the next line. So the entire show message dialog box, we're going to have null for the first argument, and then this whole formatted string for the second argument. So then if we go ahead and save that, we can run it. And so now it's going to go ahead and give me these input dialog boxes. So for this first one, I'll put in 1000. So I'm just going to enter pretty much the same values I did before, but keep in mind you could make it anything you want now. So when I push OK, this is going to be treated as a string, and we're going to immediately put that into set balance. And through method overloading, we'll pick out the correct version of set balance that we want to use. So go ahead and push OK. So now it's going to go ahead and set my balance to 1000. Next, we're going to do the amount to deposit, so we'll do 300 again. Again, with method overloading, it'll pick out the correct version of the deposit method, and it will go ahead and add this amount to what I already have for balance. So we're going to do that 1000 plus 300, give us 1300. Push OK. And then finally, it's going to say how much are you withdrawing. For this one, we'll do 500, and with this last one, again, method overloading is going to allow it to pick out the correct version of withdraw. Go ahead and parse out the double that's in this string. Go ahead and subtract that from the 1300 that we currently have and give us 800 at the very end. So when I push OK, we'll see that message dialog box. And inside of it, we see your current balance is $800. Alright, so at this point, this is going to wrap up everything for method overloading, giving us a chance to take a look at a class that has several methods that are all being overloaded in some way, except for this get balance. So that's going to finish up everything for this. In the next video, what I want to go ahead and take a look at now is discussing a little bit about why it is that we need to specify these different variable names for things like our fields and these parameters. So I want to talk a little bit about the relationship between those in the next video.